Have you ever noticed that when people say African fashion, many of us immediately picture something? Maybe it's wax prints, maybe it's bold colors, beadwork, or head wraps. But have you ever stopped to ask why that image comes up so quickly? Why does African fashion so often get reduced to one visual idea in our minds? Hi, my name is Linda. I'm a communication scholar exploring African fashion as a lens to understand people, culture, history, power, and design, and I invite others to see the world differently through what we wear. In today's video, we're talking about African fashion, what it actually means, and why so many of us tend to imagine it as one aesthetic, even though the reality is far more complex. I wanted to make this video because I've noticed that the conversation around African fashion often jumps straight into either celebration or definition without first questioning the assumptions underneath those ideas. So, before we can talk about trends, designers, or representation, I think we need to slow down and ask a more basic question. What are we actually referring to when we say African fashion? So, what do we actually mean when we say African fashion? It sounds like a simple question, but the more you sit with it, the more complicated it becomes, especially when we expect it to be one neat answer. But maybe that expectation itself is the issue. Maybe African fashion isn't the name of a single style at all. Instead, it might be better understood as an umbrella term, a broad category that includes the many fashion traditions, histories, industries, and evolving design practices found across the African continent. That means African fashion includes both historical dress traditions and contemporary fashion. It includes luxury brands and everyday clothing. It includes couture, streetwear, independent designers, and local textile practices that have existed for generations. Once we see it that way, African fashion stops being one thing. It becomes many things existing within the same category. If African fashion isn't a single style, then why do so many of us imagine it as one? Think about the first image that came to your mind when you heard the phrase African fashion. Why that image specifically, and why not others? We don't usually apply the same logic to other parts of the world. European fashion is not one aesthetic. We already understand those categories as diverse. So, why does African fashion so often get visually narrowed down? Africa is home to thousands of ethnic groups and hundreds of textile traditions. There are different climates, materials, religions, histories, trade routes, and political experiences across the continent. So it doesn't really make sense to expect all of that to produce one visual language. That doesn't mean they aren't shared influences or connections. They are. Ideas, materials, and styles do travel and evolve across regions, but shared influences are not the same as a single aesthetic. So maybe the issue isn't that African fashion is difficult to define. Maybe it's that we've been expecting an entire continent to fit one visual idea in the first place. African fashion isn't one aesthetic, it's many aesthetic traditions existing alongside one another. So I want to leave you with this question. If African fashion isn't one visual language, where do you think that single image we often imagine actually comes from? Let me know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more content like this, feel free to subscribe. You can also check out some of the other videos on this channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.